Greetings fellow gamers, I'm the Soulsborne Seeker and today I'll be reviewing Emberbane, a metroidvania developed by Hamlet Games and released on the 25th of February 2026 for PC, with PS5, Nintendo Switch and Xbox Series console releases planned sometime in the future. Emberbane was one of my most anticipated metroidvanias ever since I first laid eyes on it a few years back, to the point where it had a prominent position in my video of best upcoming metroidvanias of 2026. Unfortunately, following a very problematic demo back in 2024, its eventual full release was marred by a litany of game-breaking bugs, missing content, and gameplay issues which earned the game a significantly negative reception, forcing the developers to lock in and work overtime to fix them. Fast forward about a month after launch, and the latest in a series of patches meant to salvage the situation was finally released, promising a significantly more stable experience as all critical issues previously pointed out by the player base had been reportedly resolved. Needless to say, that was my cue to jump into the game, which I wasted no time doing considering how long I had been waiting for it. Now, given this introduction, I'm sure you have a lot of questions about Emberbane. Is the game playable? Is it fixed? Is it fun? Is it frustrating? Does it still suffer from bugs? Well, the simple answer to all of these questions is a resounding yes. Okay, maybe the answer is not that simple, so let's dive into the nitty-gritty and see what became of Emberbane. The game transpires in a war-torn world that suffered the fall of a comet-like object known as the Emberbane, a celestial body whose unexpected arrival brought with it a newfound change that awakened elemental powers within numerous individuals. Following a period of intense conflict between the newly risen superhumans, a single man stood victorious, who took control over the land, became its king, and brought forth peace and prosperity. Unfortunately, his reign wasn't meant to last, as the very enemies he once defeated and imprisoned managed to escape and returned for vengeance. After a brutal fight, the ruler finally fell and had his heart torn from his chest, but with his dying breath he managed to infuse his soul to an orphan infant girl called Ophelia as his last act of defiance against the throne's usurpers. Years later, Ophelia, now a young woman, finds herself imprisoned just as her fiery powers awaken, signifying that it is finally time to carry out the fallen king's will by hunting down and destroying his killers, who have been reigning over the land with an iron fist ever since they overthrew the sovereign. The story of Emberbane is kind of an odd duck to analyze. On a very basic level, it is an engaging and straightforward tale of revenge presented in both beautifully rendered semi-animated cutscenes as well as pixel-perfect scripted sequences, always accompanied by incredibly solid voice acting that delivers some interestingly lyrical conversations and soliloquies meant to not only provide insight into the world's lore and history, but also the feelings and personalities of the characters themselves. The thing is, while I absolutely enjoyed all of the aforementioned narrative vehicles, I frequently felt that in its attempt to come off as sophisticated, eloquent, and refined, the writing often came across as somewhat pretentious and needlessly convoluted to the point where I had to do the occasional mental gymnastics in order to decipher the meaning behind the words. I understand that dialogue here was meant to come off as dramatic and poignant, which is definitely supported by the quality of the voice acting present, but I truly believe that this is one of those situations where simpler and less would have been more. That's not to say that every piece of discussion is oddly elevated, but a lot of the important parts are, especially when delivered by the king, who seems to have a knack for the dramatic. I'll also note that some of the dialogue can overstay its welcome, especially the king's monologues, which often feel like an exercise in refined excess and more of a writing flex than anything else, since the same information he delivers in a minute of talking could have been achieved in less than half that time. Though, to be fair, said instances are not that frequent, the voice actor is awesome and cutscenes can be skipped, so people who dislike dialogue-heavy sections are covered. Now, while the narrative structure and its delivery can be a mixed bag at times, the same cannot be said about the game's world, which is absolutely beautiful to look at, courtesy of the fantastic pixel art style utilized to bring it to life. The biomes that comprise the setting are significantly diverse, ranging from lush forests, snowy ascents, and underwater complexes all the way to underground lairs and bustling cityscapes, with each area featuring an impressive amount of detail in the form of unique flora, fauna, and citizenry, all of which do a great job of fleshing out the world, with immersion being further enhanced by some wonderful musical pieces that are a joy for the ears. appears. Now, given a setting as beautiful as this, you would have expected for it to also be brimming with secrets to find, but unfortunately, exploration does leave a lot to be desired here, though it still offers several things to track down and collect. Emberbane's discoverables are divided into 6 different categories, namely artifacts, quest items, upgrade tomes, codex pages, life flasks, and sparks. Artifacts refer to certain equipables that you can arm yourself with at save points, which grant you benefits that are related to either combat or exploration. Quest items refer to specific objects related to tasks that are offered by some NPCs you'll come across, the completion of which yields rewards. Upgrade tomes increase Ophelia's statistics, with specific abilities corresponding to certain tome colors, such as red for damage and green for hit points. Codex pages are scattered pieces of a manuscript that you must collect and then deliver to a librarian for a special reward. Life flasks are used in order to restore a chunk of your health and are replenished at save points. Finally, sparks are the game's currency, which you earn either by defeating enemies or finding and destroying breakable crystals, and can be used to either purchase items from merchants or to level up your powers, the latter of which we will cover in the combat section. Now, why would I say that exploration is subpar when there are all of these things for you to collect? Well, it all comes down to the aforementioned merchants. You see, with the exception of the codex pages and quest items, the rest of the collectibles are actually more of purchasables, meaning that the vast majority of artifacts as well as all of the upgrade tomes and life flasks are earned via their acquisition from the numerous sellers populating the setting, with just a few of the artifacts being quest rewards. Some of the codex pages can be a bit tricky to find, I'll give the game that, but overall, secret areas were nearly non-existent here, with Emberbane being the first metroidvania I've played that had 0 breakable walls to access hidden places as far as memory serves, and this is something that is connected to another issue I have with the game, which is its odd mix of linearity and non-linearity. More specifically, while Emberbane does allow for a non-linear approach to which bosses you'll face first, at least to an extent, the biomes themselves are largely horizontal, and while backtracking is necessary to reach previously inaccessible areas, it didn't feel that prominent given the aforementioned merchant-based approach to collectibles, thus giving the experience a largely linear feel, something that can be easily glimpsed by having a quick glance at the map overview. Speaking of the map, this is another element of the game that could use some improvement, since it is currently lacking many quality of life elements. On the bright side, the overview is logistically accurate and marks down save points, fast travel portals, your own location, as well as places that you have marked manually. On the downside, nothing else is marked on the map as far as automatic marking goes, and unfortunately, manual markers are somewhat problematic to use. More specifically, the cursor movement when sliding over the map overview is incredibly sensitive and doesn't allow for the exact pinpointing of a location to mark manually when using a controller, making it necessary to briefly switch to mouse and keyboard if you want to be precise, which was a bit frustrating though very much bearable. To end this on a positive, the fast travel system is completely on point, with you being capable of teleporting across the map via the use of numerous portals dotting the setting, so 0 complaints here. Moving on to platforming, this is unconditionally the central foundation of the game, as well as one of its most entertaining aspects, though whether you'll fully enjoy it or not will largely depend on your tolerance for frustration at times. And do allow me to explain. For starters, the vast majority of the map is actually comprised of platforming gauntlets that boast varying challenge levels, and said challenge is mainly connected to the game's elemental system. More specifically, as you progress through the story, you'll gain access to a total of 4 different elemental forms, namely fire, earth, water, and lightning. Switching between said forms happens instantaneously by tilting the right analog stick to one of 4 directions, with each form bringing with it its own modes of attack as well as specific traversal abilities that help reach new areas. You're probably already getting where I'm going with this. In essence, while the initial acrobatic segments you'll have to overcome are somewhat simple, things start getting harder once the need to switch forms during platforming instances becomes mandatory. Now, while having to move back and forth between 2 forms is fairly easy, some of the latter set pieces will give you a run for your money as all 4 forms will be mandatory to progress, since those instances require snappy reflexes as you make instant observations on which form is necessary during platforming, which can lead to confusion as you try to make the right selection while also struggling not to fall to your doom. Full disclosure, I actually did get a morbid sense of fun and satisfaction from these gauntlets, so they did work for me for the most part, but if challenging platforming that borders on insane insanity is not your thing, then you're going to have a bad time here, especially since there are some sections where checkpoints are not particularly generous. On an added note, one thing that I did find interesting is that there were some areas that you could actually bypass by thinking outside the box, which I'm not sure the developers intended, but they were very few and not related to the truly challenging segments, so there was little impact to the experience. Combat-wise, Emberbane does make an admirable effort to offer a multi-layered battle system, which I did appreciate. On a basic level, each one of your 4 forms has its own set of attacks of both the melee as well as ranged variety. Depending on which element you're using, your close quarters battle capabilities will vary in weapon type, attack speed, and damage, such as brandishing a flaming whip while in your fire form and a massive hammer in your earth form. Melee aside, each element also allows for a specific ranged assault, such as fireballs or electric shurikens, which you utilize at the cost of an energy bar that fills up while you're attacking and, once full, keeps you from further ranged attacks for a few seconds while it cools down. In addition, the aforementioned artifacts offer special benefits when equipped at a save point, with each element allowing for one artifact to be utilized for a total of 5 slots, including an element that you cannot swap to but whose slot you can use. Furthermore, your journey allows you to unlock additional special attacks either by interacting with specific altars you come across or by leveling up your elemental powers at save points via the use of sparks, which truly diversifies your arsenal. Now, while all that is well and good, with the exception of a few artifacts, I never found the need to make use of anything other than my basic melee attacks, with the occasional ranged assault only during the early hours of my playthrough, thus making this whole system kind of obsolete, especially if you decide to use an artifact that allows you to leech health from enemies. There was also an over-reliance on caged fights, which locked you in small arenas where you had to fight a total of 3 waves of enemies before being allowed to proceed, though I didn't really mind that since said rooms were brief and repeatable, meaning they could be used to quickly farm sparks and buy useful upgrades from merchants. Healing is carried out via the use of the aforementioned life flasks, which replenish at save points and whose number can be increased via their purchase from merchants. Finally, death carries no penalty, aside from you restarting from your latest checkpoint, which can sometimes result in a run back to your last location, though all bosses have save points close to them, so nothing to worry about here. All in all, general combat was okay, even though most of its capabilities went unused, at least by me. That being said, things did get significantly better when dealing with the game's bosses. Speaking of Emberbane's main villains, my final impression of them leans heavily on the positive side of things. While most of them weren't that impressive from a visual design perspective, the fights themselves were quite fun, with each big bad boasting a solid set of attacks that kept you on your toes and required your undivided attention if you were to emerge victorious. My main gripe with the bosses is that they got progressively easier the stronger I got, with only 3 of them managing to take me down once, while the rest fell during my first try, something that I also attribute to the aforementioned life leech artifact, which took a lot of the bite out of those fights. In terms of difficulty, Emberbane is situated on the normal side of things, with a number of difficulty spikes during the second half of the game, courtesy of some complex platforming segments. As for length, it took me 9 hours to complete Emberbane with 90% completion rate and 1 of 4 endings achieved, with a certain bug I'll talk about in a moment having kept me from going for 100% and achieving the rest of the endings, which shouldn't have taken me more than an additional hour. Now, before talking about price and moving to the verdict, there are a few technical issues I dealt with that I need to point out. For starters, during my fight with the first boss, the game bugged and froze the enemy in place, and after I defeated her, would not show me the appropriate cutscene to move forward, forcing me to restart from the latest checkpoint and redo the fight, at which point everything went smoothly. Second, the quest update pop-up doesn't show text, which is definitely a bug, though I'll admit there wasn't a single second where I felt lost and didn't know what to do, so no damage done here, but it should be fixed regardless. Third, there are a total of 3 locked doors in 2 separate biomes, 2 of which should supposedly have opened after I defeated a certain boss, while the third reportedly opens after a cutscene that did not trigger for me, thus keeping me from fully exploring the map and going for 100%. On that note, there are 2 NPCs whom I'm fairly certain are merchants, but their wares are nowhere to be found, which further blocks me from achieving full completion. In addition, there was a specific platforming section during which my double jump failed to trigger at times when following a wall jump, though that issue was limited to said gauntlet. Finally, an achievement for defeating one of the main bosses didn't pop off. Now, there was one more bug when when delivering a side quest to a woman, which got the game stuck during the delivery dialogue and forced me to restart from the last checkpoint, at which point the woman had disappeared and the quest items were still in my inventory, though I was able to complete the quest regardless by finding her in the next location she was meant to be, so all good I suppose. One last thing I want to add here is that there have been reports of people being unable to deliver the codex pages to the librarian. I also thought that was an issue, but as it turns out, you need to have all 15 pages to complete the quest and cannot deliver them separately, so do keep that in mind. So having said all that, for a price of about 15 bucks, I'd recommend waiting for at least one more patch before diving into this one, though I'll admit I got a lot of enjoyment out of it in its current state as well. In conclusion, I had a lot of fun playing Emberbane despite its flaws. The story was interesting, albeit straightforward and somewhat predictable, the visuals and music were fantastic, platforming was quite entertaining for the most part, combat was fully serviceable, and the boss fights were fun. On the downside, dialogue is sometimes needlessly convoluted and lengthy, platforming gauntlets can be quite nightmarish during the final third of the game on account of the need to quickly switch between 4 different forms, exploration leaves a lot to be desired by having most collectibles be available as products purchased by merchants, the world feels quite linear despite some non-linearity in terms of which biome to tackle first, the map overview needs some fine-tuning to be fully usable, most of the special combat moves are wholly unnecessary, bosses get quite easy after you get the life leech artifact, and finally, there are the aforementioned technical issues that definitely need to be addressed in the next patch. While Emberbane did not live up to my expectations, I still found myself enjoying my playthrough, though I'm not sure if all players will be as forgiving as I was of the issues that drag it down, both from a gameplay as well as technical perspective. That being said, if what you've seen of the game in this video speaks to you, do give it a go, though I'd wait for one more patch if I were you. My final verdict on Emberbane is 6.2 out of 10. What did you think about Emberbane? Have you played it yet? Do you agree with the points I mentioned, or do you see things differently? Let me know in the comments below, and please subscribe if you enjoyed this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, Soulsborne Seeker out.